There's this story I picked up a long time ago, like 30 years ago now. It was old then. I didn't like the way it played out. I actually hated it, but I kind of get it now. It was about this guy named Bart. Bart preferred not to. He started a new job pretty strong. He looked hungry, that's why they hired him, and he was living up to that impression. But somewhere along the line, he must have reevaluated his relationship with the grind. And that's what killed him, basically. I don't know why he did it. I guess maybe Bart didn't want to feel like it was all for nothing. But it's hard to say, really. His boss would find him with a 1,000-yard stare and a stack of work. At least if you did your job, it'd be accomplishing something instead of nothing, he'd tell Bart, who would just reply, "I prefer not to." It's a pretty good line. Polite, erudite. He could have just said no or nothing, but he went out of his way to explain that despite any plea from everyone, this was what he'd rather do, just nothing. And you know, patience and charity, they only bend so far. So his boss added someone to pick up the work that Bart wasn't doing, but he kept showing up. He may have even just started living at the office. I don't know if anyone knew whether he had someplace to go or anyone in his life. So the office moved. Bart stayed. And when the new landlord called his old boss said, "He doesn't work for me anymore." So Bart was persistent at nothing, if nothing else. Eventually, as these things go, the police got involved to get him out. He, of course, preferred not to go. Just picked a point in the middle distance and stared. The cops called his old boss, too. I think they were hoping he was some kind of Bart whisperer. The guy was kind and patient anyway, so he vouched that Bart was going through something, and he asked that they at least try to keep him comfortable. They even bent the rules a little bit so he could get some extra food delivered. And then the next day, he planned to go down with his lawyer and try to help Bart. And that's when Bart's story ends. Cold chicken wing platter untouched next to him. I think the sergeant was quoted saying he preferred not to eat. In dying, Bart had chosen life on his own terms, I guess. It didn't make a ton of sense to everyone else. But neither does the ritual of high-intensity labor to serve the latest gold rush, when you get right down to it. And so, if much of what we do is out of our control, then maybe we can only express our agency by choosing what we won't do. When it's just one guy like Bart, it's enigmatic and frustrating. But if a lot of people did this at once, it'd terrify a lot more people for a lot of reasons. I mean, think about it. You can imagine how a choice to just not do something anymore can cause lots of disruption. Here lies the sedan, for example. So, in a way, aren't we all Bart? And so, with apologies to Herman Melville, let's get to episode 367 of the Hooniverse podcast. We'll talk some more about what happens when people realize that you could just not. This is Hooniverse. I am Dan Roth. Thanks for listening. We are up to episode 367. We're calling it You Could Just Not.
And I'm Ross Ballett, and thank you for joining us. So on the topic of You Could Just Not, this past Q3, people just didn't. They didn't. They did not. So we know that sedan sales have been tanking, and that's no surprise to see them slip even further. But it's not great news across the board for domestic car sales. And take this with a grain of salt. There are the obvious caveats. People are buying small crossovers. people are buying mid-sized pickups for a change. And the biggest caveat of all is possibly the Nissan Leaf and the Mitsubishi Mirage, which have seen a huge sales spike. But as a blanket statement, people just didn't go out and buy cars in Q3.
I mean, look, man, inflation, it's a thing, no matter what they say. And they've lowered the interest. We talked about this on the last episode, right? They dropped the interest rate. And people still need cars, but I think they're just choosing to not stretch. And I think that really kind of dovetails with the idea of they could just not. They could just forego the fancier thing or the bigger thing, and they need wheels and they need it to fit in the budget. I was really shocked to see the Leaf having a good sales month period of time, quarter.
There's a reason for that.
Oh, what's the reason?
If I'm not mistaken, they were leasing Leafs for like $199 or $99 a month in a good portion of the country. And somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but 180 miles of electric range for $200 a month that's cheap in today's money.
That seems like a really good deal. I mean, the Leaf is a good car. I like the Leaf.
It's not a bad car.
But the Mirage, on the other hand.
The Mirage is not.
I find the Mirage fascinating, but I don't find it a good car for this market. I don't know. What's your take on the Mirage?
The Mirage was a great demonstration in what isn't what the U.S. consumer is buying and hasn't been buying since the early 70s when Honda and Toyota first made their land year. But the Mirage, great city car, not really great for much else.
Yeah, so then why is it, I guess, is economics the only reason why it's spiking?
Fire sale on Mirages. It must have been. And again, the Mirage and the Leaf are kind of two sides of the same coin. They're inexpensive to own and operate and insure, presumably. And look, we had to get to the end of the COVID inflation bubble at some point. And, through the summer, people were starting to taper off in how much they were spending on vehicles, or through the spring, sorry. And then, the late part of the summer into the early fall, it was just, that was it. I think everybody is realizing, and again, not to get political, but partially on the topic of the upcoming election, there's a little bit of trepidation in people's purchasing and what they're willing to do coming up on a potentially, huge swing one way or another. But cars are also just getting more expensive year over year, That's not helping the fact.
Yeah, well, and money is more expensive too, even with the rate dropping. It kind of dropped at the end of this quarter. So any kind of payoff from that is going to take a while to be reflected in car sales numbers, because it's not the only thing people need to buy. If you have a car, you will continue to either maintain it and use it just because cars are so expensive. And I think that also plays into the decision making of you could just not. You could convince yourself you need a new car, and it was easy when interest rates were lower, but they're up in the sevens or the sixes for a car loan, for a good car loan or good lease deal. And it gets they just get more expensive from there. And if you're still looking at digging out of whatever hole you were in, or your inflation bite is still high in other areas of your personal economy, a new car, unless you need it, you're probably holding off.
The car you have is almost always less expensive than purchasing something to replace it, whether it's brand new or used at a comparable price. General rule is stick with what you have unless you have to get out of it. And part of the COVID explanation here too, which is again playing into why we're seeing people not buying cars, and I hope this isn't the case, but probably not buying cars through the end of the year all that much, is that the overinflated price of all of the used vehicles in the used market during COVID meant you could go and buy a new car with better financing for about the same as buying used. And, those two lines have intersected and they're both just falling off at this point.
Yeah, and that was actually what led us to buy our first Grand Cherokee back in 2013. Totally different economic situation versus now, but we looked at purchasing used, and all of that stuff, like all of the vehicles in that class, you're like, you don't really get anything for going used. First of all, they want you to buy new, so the deals are more attractive new. And the only thing you really get for purchasing used is maybe a little bit off the price and
better
wear and tear.
warranty in some cases.
Sometimes. But then you've got the crapshoot of what happened to this car, how was it treated. So, you do, if you're buying new, you kind of accept that you're going to take that depreciation whack. But if you plan on keeping it, it's kind of not a huge deal. Anyway.
Yeah, you don't care as much. That's how I ended up in my truck. I went to buy a used 4Runner, realized they were the same price as new 4Runners, and then went, wait a minute.
Yeah. It's like if you can swing a used model of these particular vehicles that is within 5 years old and is very popular and is premium anyway, like a 4Runner is kind of a premium vehicle. The Grand Cherokee is a premium leaning vehicle. Like if you can swing the used one, it's a pretty good chance that you can swing the new one. And if you're on the edge, if used versus new is really the decision maker there, you're probably looking at stuff you can't afford either way, used or new. So yeah.
Yep. And just rolling through this, there's also people getting cold feet with new tech. One of the notes you have on here is that Ram sales were down. There was a brief break in Ram production as they transitioned from the prior gen to the new generation of truck, but a turbocharged inline six isn't the same appeal to the traditional truck buyer as a Hemi.
I forgot about that. So the Hemi is gone.
The Hemi is gone in the 1500. I think you can still get the 6.4 in the 2500. Yeah, but this is also what's pushing people down into mid-sized trucks because they're saying, okay, I can buy a 1500 for 70 grand or a truck that's 3/4 the size for 45.
Well, and you can at GM and you can at Ford and you can at Toyota and even Nissan. You cannot at Ram. They don't have anything
yet. And I'm sure somebody listening is saying, just wait and see.
I get it. Like it's nice to swoop into the market after it's established and there's demand there with a killer product, but they seem really, really late to the game here.
Dodge Hornet, cough, cough. We'll see. We'll see what comes of that. But there was a time going back to around the transition after the recession in 2009 ish, where there weren't many mid-sized trucks. Eventually, the mid-sized truck market started to blossom in 2016 after Chevy and GMC rolled out the new Colorado and Canyon, and people started to say, okay, I can spend $45,000 or $40,000 on a mid-sized truck, or I can spend $55,000 on a full-size truck and get more space and the same gas mileage and more power and more towing capacity. But that's not the case anymore, and we're seeing. I had a Ram Tungsten press vehicle a few months back, and it was $1,500, nearing $100,000.
Oh, did that have the Hurricane?
It had the Hurricane.
So what did you think of it? I haven't driven that.
Mixed bag. It's more than enough power, and it hustles a heavier truck around better than the 5.7 ever did. Even the e-torque 5.7. The Hurricane it's a really, really strong engine, and I think especially in like the Grand Wagoneer, it's going to be amazing. Grand Wagoneer, that's the model. Yeah. There's Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer.
Look, those things are going to be gone. They're not selling.
Oh my God, yeah. You want a cheap vehicle. But I just thought it needed like a little bit of a throttle tuning adjustment. It was very much tuned for like early off idle input, and the Hemi never felt that way. And that could just be because I've spent time in all of them. People walking into a dealer and buying them are gonna, wow, it gets better gas mileage and it's faster, awesome. But we'll see.
Well, that 5.7 Hemi, I like that engine. I've always have. It's for what it is, it's pretty powerful. It's not super efficient. It sounds great. It's a good engine. It's a good V8 in that kind of small block way. But it always felt peaky. It always felt like, there's enough low end, but it's not like an LS or a GM V8. It feels like it's a little soft on the low end, and then you get to the power peak and it runs out of breath, and then you do it again after it shifts. And it's better in the bigger displacements. 6.4 is great.
6.4 is great. That's a great motor. Absolutely love it. And the 5.7. When they rolled it out, it was a broad appeal motor. So
but that was 20 years ago.
Almost
20 years ago.
Okay, if you want to laugh, almost concurrently, like with a 1 year gap, my parents had a 5.7 Grand Cherokee WK2. They still have it. It's on a second motor. I had a Challenger with the 5.7, and then my brother bought a used Ram with the 5.7. So this is going everywhere,
Broad experience,
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, unfamiliar is not generally good for full-size pickup purchasing. Like historically, people buy brand loyalty based things, and that's not where we are. We could beat a dead horse on this one. So
no. But it is interesting. Like, I think the driving experience of the Hurricane will garner its own fans. It feels good off the line. It's twin turbo V6, so you can basically put the torque peak wherever you want it and keep it there, keep it flat.
Is it a twin turbo? I thought it was a inline straight, like a straight six with a turbo.
I thought it was twin turbo, but either way. Did I say V6? I meant straight six.
Yeah, we're gonna fact check ourselves.
No,
live.
the Hurricane is definitely a straight six, but
it is a twin turbo straight six. So we were both right,
close enough,
and wrong.
Yeah, but so the twin turbos let it spool up fast, so you don't have much turbo lag, and basically, I'm sure the torque plot of that engine just basically looks like a straight line with a tiny little bump at one end and a bump at the other.
I the one caveat, and we've had conversations about this off air, myself and some other people, and I do admit to having an extreme amount of idle time when I had that Ram, because it was like 95 degrees for the whole week.
Yeah.
And I do admit that I didn't do much highway driving, but I barely broke 11 miles per gallon.
Oh, that's bad.
It's heavy, dude. It's heavy.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's a new engine. You got to find out what it does.
That's true.
So, but still, that is horrible. That's the same gas mileage I got in the TRX when I had it.
I'd much rather have the TRX, man. Supercharger wine is my thing.
Yeah.
I've had turbo cars for decades, and they're always thirsty when you use the turbos. Like, that's
they need
the
the same amount of air and fuel as an engine that doesn't.
Right. You're just like, you use it less of the time, and when you're not using it, it's more efficient. But when it just comes down, it's the volumetric efficiency. If you're making that much power, you need this much air and this much fuel.
Yep. No
matter how big the cylinder is, you're packing it in there, and they're a variable displacement engine, and that's what happens. They suck fuel when you use the power. Anyway.
Yep. So speaking of volumetric efficiency, the Acura TLX is very much down, and that is a poor example of maximizing interior space, I will say.
Oh, I love that car.
I adore the way it looks.
I love the way it handles too. Like that. Really? Yeah, that car. And I had the Type S a few years ago, like when it was new on the market, and it was just like a classic Acura sports sedan. Just felt great on the road. It's its own thing. Acura at least has a little bit of its own personality, so it didn't feel like it was trying to be a BMW or a Mercedes or something. I just really liked it, and so I'm sad to see like sedans are down because people have not ever for a long time, and then the TLX, like that makes me sad just because I think it's a great car that everybody should experience.
It is. I don't disagree. It just might be wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, meanwhile, minivans, we'll see on the opposite end.
I don't know that. See, the minivans might be the next segment that dies because there's not a whole lot of heat there.
Yeah. The question here is there's no way. Preface this by saying there's no way to pack as much stuff and people into a given amount of space in a passenger vehicle as a minivan. And on the flip side, we're seeing SUVs get bigger, but they're not growing in space the same way.
They're growing on the outside, not the inside.
Yeah, the new Sequoia, and this is a company trying to maximize efficiency and power, and it eats into usability. So we'll see. I think there will always be a minivan because rental companies need them.
That's true. Well, then maybe it won't totally die. Maybe it's just demand limited, and automakers are going to just drop out, from participation. I honestly think that Stellantis with the Chrysler vans will be possibly one of the last, because that is their niche.
Yep. I put, I think, almost 700 miles on a hybrid Pacifica. I think prior to when we recorded the first episode of the show. It was great.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It was like 33 miles per gallon combined, packed all our stuff in, with no qualms. Just a good car. And that's all it needs to be for a minivan,
Yeah, no, I like the Pacifica a lot. Minivans that's an interesting segment. Like, I think there's too many players in there right now, so somebody's going to just kind of give it up. There's not enough. But there's just not enough volume, I think, to make it sort of, I don't know, profitable. Maybe they've figured it out, but it just seems like there's enough choice and you wind up on the couple of defaults. You're like Sienna or Pacifica, because the Odyssey, the Odyssey drives more sporty, but I've seen enough transmission and engine failures in the Odyssey.
Oh, the 9-speed?
Yeah. Once they hit 130,000 miles, the engines even are tired sometimes. It's
interesting.
That's not great. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And Honda infotainment sucks. Especially since I just got done praising the TLX.
Oh, man. It's too bad because the Ridgeline is so great and the Civic Si is so great, but the infotainment feels like it's 2012,
Yeah.
Speaking of 2012, that was around when Henrik Fisker was trying.
Nice.
Like that segue?
Yeah. People just didn't. Yeah.
People just didn't. Yeah. So go ahead. I know you.
So Fisker, we can keep this one short because, it's been clear that people just didn't, but they didn't. They didn't buy them, apparently, even though it's kind of a testament. The car looked good, it had some interesting ideas, and they had a couple of different things on the way, but they were so mismanaged that people didn't buy them. I think because they got that stench of desperation or whatever off of Fisker, and they were just like, no, that's not a place to spend our money, and they didn't really think of a good customer experience. There were so many problems with that car that weren't thought of. They spent the money on making every single window go down in it versus funding a good
drivetrain,
or dealer network or something like that. And I used to think that some other automaker might swipe in and buy what's left for a steep discount, but I don't honestly. And I talked to some people who were there, just kind of off the record. I don't really think there's anything there. Despite what happened over the last week or two, where there was a TechCrunch story, they kind of just completely deserted their facility that they were renting, and the landlord was like, "What the heck, guys?" Because random people were showing up and loading stuff in their cars. There was barrels of coolant and oil left over that he's going to now dispose of.
They got evicted and just totally left a mess.
Yeah, which is not a classy thing to do.
Which is ironic considering we're talking about Henrik Fisker and his company.
Right.
And he is a man who created some of the classiest looking cars of all time.
Yeah.
And
the cars look good. They even left a clay model of a pickup truck that looked pretty slick, man. I would have liked to see that on the road.
So I'm gonna try to share my screen here as we navigate new technology, or at least I do.
There we go. Yeah. It's a nice Aston Martin.
DB9, Henrik Fisker, this car, and then the BMW Z8, which in my opinion is one of, if not the greatest looking vehicles of all time. He designed these. He's not somebody who is unintelligent or doesn't know what people are, their heart and soul is pulled towards. It just seems that he doesn't have the great business mind of some people who have built brands afterwards.
I think that's fair. Artists are not always good at business, and perhaps he's better as an individual contributor to a solid team with business acumen. And this is not the first time we've seen this. This is like round 3 for him, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, there was the Fiskars of the mid-2000s, which were rebodied BMW 6 Series and Mercedes SLs, if I'm not mistaken. Not rebodied. They were like, it was, they took the cars and made them look a little different and a little nicer.
And that's not like the Karma, right? That's like,
no.
Okay.
That's pre-Karma.
That was pre-Karma, right.
So there was that. Then there was the Karma, which gorgeous, absolutely stunning car.
Still around. You can buy a Revero, right? It's Revero.
Then there's the Revero, which allegedly was supposed to get like an LSA with a, 6-speed stick at one point. So much for that. And now it's just since then been iteration and iteration of failed business, and the electric Fiskars are attractive.
But see, the problem is that like the tech's not. They didn't do anything really other than style the cars. So he did. He basically did what the styling division and colors and materials would do at a larger automaker. So what does it look like? How does everything look and feel on the inside?
Yeah.
But everything else, like Magna, I think is the vendor for pretty much the whole powertrain. I think they're the assembly vendor for sure. So they're building them. And like most of the stuff is coming from other places. You're not developing your own infotainment. You're buying it and maybe tweaking the software.
It's better that way. It's better. It's better than having the automakers themselves try to do it. I mean,
unless you're big, yeah, for sure.
Unless you're big, yeah. It usually goes poorly. But yeah, one of the questions you have on our show notes, I just want to read aloud, was right. Is anything of value lost? Yeah,
that's a good. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the loss is a potential loss more than an actual discernible current loss, because the prospect of Fisker still putting vehicles out under his design vision is a shame. That didn't manifest in a better place and way in the electric market. But anything substantial, tangible, usable, like from today's world of cars, no.
Well,
no.
If he goes for round 4, he's got a bad name twice at least. So that's a problem, right? Yeah. Look, I've lost a lot of potential in my life too. You just kind of got to move on, man.
Man. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to beat this one to horse. We'll just beat this horse to death. Beat this one.
Check in this time next year to see what Henrik Fisker is up to or not.
Maybe he should go back to another automaker. Maybe that would be a good move for Henrik.
Yeah. Bear with me one second. And this is like real-time show stuff. I'm watching my daughter try to escape her room on the monitor.
That's awesome. My microphone is syncing. No, don't apologize for having children.
Syncing like Fisker.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
Do you need to go make a rescue?
Life. No, I think my wife is there for the saving. Yeah, and oh god, I don't want to kill this whole Fisker thing, but we did want to close out our topic segment with a recurring bit where we talk about a car that's relevant to the theme that has been our through line in the shows, and we're telling you this to set it up just so you all know where we're going with this. And this occurred to me today when I drove past a Plymouth Prowler, which is the absolute pinnacle of you could just not.
Oh, so you're not a Prowler fan?
I think it looks fantastic.
It does.
But it probably should have been put to bed when they, couldn't put an engine that matches the styling in it.
Well, I go back and forth on this, and I didn't know how much involvement Chip Foose had in it.
Oh yeah,
it was like one of his design projects from college or something. Then there's a couple of video series out there, or like a couple of videos of him talking about it, which is really just fascinating to talk about the decisions they made on that car. I think the value that Chrysler got out of that wasn't the Prowler. It was it was
Halo car.
It was, but the thing that they got out of it too was they learned how to work with aluminum and different construction techniques. And this is like 90s Chrysler, which had been infiltrated
also
by
Dodge Stratus.
Right. But the great thing about 90s Chrysler, which is a really inspirational tale, is so many AMC people came into that company, and that's what saved 90s Chrysler was the AMC people who knew how to do things on a shoestring. And they got Francois Castang from Renault, who also knew how to do things on a shoestring really fast because he had F1 racing experience. So he was like, look, man, you want to iterate fast.
Yep.
You're making parts for the car on Monday and you're on the track on Sunday. Like, you got a really short time. Bob Lutz was on Autoline After Hours talking about this like a week ago. And his experience with just automakers in general, like, he was like, well, nobody could make any decisions. I was like, ding, ding, ding. Yes, that was my experience as well. Nobody wants any responsibility. But anyway, sorry.
No, that's great backstory.
The Prowler is like, it's fantastic in the sense that they made the decision to bring it to market, and then they were like, how do we bring it to market? And I think there's actually, if you wanted to look for the through line between the Prowler and the Pontiac Solstice, you might be able to find that goes through Bob Lutz, maybe. Because they're both like parts bin Halo cars, right? It was all the LH stuff in the Prowler. And the LH had been designed to take both transverse and longitudinal powertrains. And that goes back to where the LH came from, which was the Eagle Premier, which was the Renault 25, which was Francois Castang.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, I love the Premier. I nerd out hard about that car, even though it definitely did not sell. But that allowed them to kind of spin their 3.5 liter engine and make it a transaxle setup. They used what they had. It would have been more fun, like with a 318 in it, I'm sure. But
anything.
The
5.9 that was in the,
Oh, right, the 360, yeah.
The 360, yeah. I mean, look at this. It's
beautiful. Look at that thing.
Stunning. It's a design that probably couldn't say that 10 times fast. Couldn't have come out of any other car company in any time except then. Who
was the design chief? Oh, Tom Gale. Tom Gale was the guy who
So.
I don't know, man. I like the Prowler. I like it more now than I did then, because I was like, oh, it's an old guy's car. And I think that's still exactly what it is.
Oh, yeah, of course. But like the Chevy SSR. But I will say...
I don't like the SSR.
There's this trope about it takes like as long to do the last 5% of the project as it does the first 95%, or it's something in that. It's, it's a whatever. But that is the embodiment of the Prowler to me. Like, they had all of this stuff that they magically made happen, and then it was time to, get it actually out to the public, and it just couldn't in the way that it should have.
Wait a second. Now that I think about it, and doing my own sort of mental parts bin, they also had the 4.7 liter, what was it called? PowerTech V8?
It was in the Grand Cherokee.
It was. Yeah. That was the last AMC V8 engine. That started under AMC. It was an overhead cam V8, and it's pretty punchy for its size, actually, and it's so unloved because it came out under Chrysler, and Chrysler was like, this doesn't fine, but it doesn't really fit on any of our other stuff. One of the things you do when you have engine production is you try to just reuse the tooling over and over again. That's why like the Chrysler V8s, like they had the LAs for years and years, because it was like 273, 318, 360, 400. They're all... Somebody's going to tell me the 400 was a big block. Fine. But they're all basically the same engine on the same bore centers, different size bores. Like, it fits on your tooling. And so this PowerTech I think part of it was like it was just expensive to produce, and they needed to save money. And they're like, the take rate's low. We have a V8 already that is long amortized. So, but that could have been cool in the Prowler.
Really cool,
right?
That could have been really cool. But I don't know.
Oh, well.
We also got the Viper at the same time, so we'll let it ride.
The Viper, it's funny.
Here we go.
The
unofficial Bob Lutz show today.
I know. I'm sorry. He's
okay.
Great stories.
Legend, icon. Yeah, don't disagree.
He talked about the Viper and how they sent it over to the Dodge product people, and they was like, we're gonna have one car, one engine, one transmission, one trim level, no side windows, soft top. Mm-hmm. And the Dodge product people looked at it and were like, yeah, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna want to have different models. We're gonna have an automatic transmission, different trim levels. And he was like, okay, so your scenario is like $300 million. We have
in 1990 money,
right,
or 89, right. Whatever
something
they were
like
getting ready to ramp it up.
And I probably got the number wrong, but it's close enough. It was hundreds of millions of dollars. And he's like, our overall budget is 80.
Yeah.
So
what do you guys
one
have that we can do here?
Right. Yeah. And that's what, like, the Solstice was another interesting thing. Like, the interesting analog with the Solstice and Bozy, Bozy Tatarovich, I forget who he's writing for now, but he did back in the day a long Twitter thread about all of the GM parts that are in the Solstice and where they came from. So like the brakes are from the back of a GMT 360 and stuff like it's just
really?
They like rifled through a bunch of stuff and they're well, this fits, we can turn it around. It's
probably
such
cheap
a
to
hot
own.
rod. Yeah, it's like total hot rod ethos. It's like the original Corvette in the sense that they just like took what they had and put a different body on it.
Do you remember the Mallet Solstice and Sky cars? Dude, that's like the, flying me out of V8 Miatas. That is like holy grail sports car.
Those
like
sell for a bunch still. You can find them on Bring a Trailer.
Really do. Yeah.
That's a fun car.
Yeah.
The Solstice and
dude, the GXP with 6-speed was a good time.
You can't be too tall. I barely fit in it, and I'm not that tall. So
right. Yeah. Well, can't have it all. And we are close on time, so
what are you driving? We can do like 5 or 10 minutes on you.
All right, let's do 5 on this. So last week I drove the Range Rover SE short wheelbase P400, which is a mouthful. It looks like this. For those watching and for those listening, imagine a Range Rover. So
it's such a sleek design.
It looks fantastic. The back end still juries out with the dark taillights that kind of frame the whole tailgate, but it drives great. It is everything that you think a Range Rover should be on the road. It's quiet, it's calm, it's just easy to murder miles in. I put I want to say about 250 miles on it, and just a good car. We could probably spend a 20 episode span talking about why it's bad that every single control on the center stack is part of the screen.
That's our default. That's bad.
That
is bad.
Do that less, automakers.
Yeah.
So I won't bitch about that. It's otherwise it's a great car. It's a Range Rover. They've really delineated what their like off-road ish line is from what the Range Rovers are as of late, which going back 20 years, actually no, probably 25 years now, weirdly, that like the Range Rover in of itself was also an off-roader. It's not anymore. Now it's the British nicest Escalade you can find.
Yeah, I mean you can get it off road though, right? Like it has the hardware and the settings.
Buttons. Yeah, it's got a very advanced traction control.
You'll get stuck without the right tires.
The tires on it are not for off road. They're not, but they they're eco tires that are extremely quiet on the highway, and that's what the buyer wants and needs.
I mean, that's listening to your customers.
100%.
They know who buys their things, and they know how they want them. So people who want to take them off-road, it's very much like the enthusiasts are like, yeah, build this thing and we'll buy it. No, you won't. Stop lying. You don't have the money. You don't buy new cars.
Yeah. Well, this one was like $125,000. So, take that as you will.
And this is why Q3 sales were down 2.4%.
Right. There's also like a reverse mentality though, where you raise the price and it makes it more attractive. That's why G-Wagons sell like crazy, because they are an inherent status symbol because of the known entity that is the sticker price. But yeah, Range Rover's great. And
the G-Wagon is also terrible. It's beautiful and it's a lovely piece, but God, is it terrible.
It's not good, but it's so bad it's good, or it's so good it's bad.
It's bonkers. It's terrible in an impressive way.
Mm-hmm. Did we talk about this last show, or did we just talk about that off air at some point?
The G-Wagon?
The G-Wagon.
I don't think we talked about it on the show. Okay. No.
Well, we should circle back on that. Speaking of Mercedes, the car that's here right now is the GLC 43, the little crossover with the Turbo 4 and the e-hybrid deal going on. It looks like this, and everybody's going to laugh at me because I'm trying to figure out how to screen share, but there's been so many different screen sharing things, Teams and Zoom and Riverside and whatever. So this is what it looks like. This is obviously the UK version, or
that looks great.
Overseas version. Yeah, it's like a Macan competitor, or an X3M competitor.
It's like, so what is it, like $70,000?
This one's $77 with the options on it. The paint's an option, and it's got some other stuff on it. The way I describe it to people who ask what it drives like is it's like a slightly lifted Golf R that is just always frantic. Like the Golf R settles down and it gets calm, and you can just like kill miles in a Golf R. This thing always feels like it's like the tiniest little prod away from like just let's go, let's fight, I'm ready, let's go, road fast now, turn. And that's that's part of its charm. Like that's what makes it so enjoyable. It's like the GLB that I had earlier this year, the AMG.
Yeah,
it's
all the little Mercedes are like that. Like the GLA 45 is like that. The AMG, it was just like it was a hot hatch essentially. And that's good, I guess, if you want to feel like you're driving around a pissed off hornet's nest. Like that has merit.
Yeah. It's a good time. And, I'm a sucker for fast crossovers and SUVs because around here, the roads are terrible. Our sight lines are terrible. So sitting a little higher and having that viewpoint is actually very helpful. And also having tires that have more than, an eighth of an inch of profile is helpful because potholes like to murder everything that isn't, like an off-road tire.
Yeah.
But it's just the GLC 43 is just a good time. It's it's less spacious than my wife's CX-5.
That's bad.
But it's fun. It's just
But you can pass like this just should be one of our regional tests, right? Like imagine you're stuck on the Merit behind a pack of slow moving people and there's that left lane hog who just won't get out of the way. Finally they move over and you've got to pass 10 cars on a hill. Oh, yeah. You don't know what's on the other side. Yeah. But you want to give it like that Mercedes can probably do it.
It can do it
with confidence.
Easily. It is not a slouch. I will say I did that exact thing on the way to the Children's Museum with my daughter in the back a few weeks ago in the S63, which was like just a joke. Just not even the least taxing highway pass ever.
My kids used to giggle at that, and then they get scared when I corner. Cornering they don't like. Acceleration they love. Cornering not their thing.
Acceleration's predictable. Cornering is less so.
Well, it leans over, and it feels uncomfortable if you don't have the steering wheel to be holding on to. So
and then I'll just wrap up my little car segment with I did finally get the exhaust complete on the GX, the MagnaFlow Overland that Real Truck sent over, and it sounds awesome.
We should put a recording up of it.
I can do that.
Yeah,
I can definitely send it to you. Yeah, it's glorious. It sounds like a V8. It sounds like the way a V8 should. I've had a few people approach me and say I didn't know a Lexus could sound like that, which is all you need to say.
That's pretty good. Yeah, so, now you need some cams, like some cams with high lift and so they kind of
that'll be like horrible for
like a drag engine. Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So, and that's it. What about you? Driving anything or still?
I haven't gotten back into the press cars quite yet, but I do actually have a gig coming up where I'm going to talk with some of the Kia folks this week about the EV9, I believe. So they're coming to town, get to check it out. I will try to get a nice little interview for us to cut into our next show. And I put the Grand Cherokee back together. The 13, I thought one of the fuel lines was leaking. And it turns out it was probably just the O-ring needed to be reseated. Oh, because I spent a week and a half or 2 weeks trying to find a used fuel line. Nobody wants to sell them. No salvage yard will touch it. And I really didn't want to cut it and put in a union and use it like a Dorman replacement part, which I could have done. I just didn't want to do that. And so I just put it back together to see where it was leaking, and didn't leak. So I was like, okay, score. Yeah. I won. It just needed to be, undone and reseated. So there's other things I have to do to that, but I've been putting some miles on it so it stays limber. Cars don't like to sit. Don't let your car sit.
Drive your cars. But very curious to hear what you think of the EV9.
I will let you know. Yeah, maybe they'll let me take one home for a week. That would be interesting. So
make sure you put your head on the driver's headrest.
Okay.
It's the
good
best.
tip. All right, I will do that. I'll let you know. At least I'll have a headrest report.
Headrest report.
All right, awesome. Well, you know what? I think that's it. I think we hit our time deadline. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope we're leaving you with wanting a little bit more. And let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think. This is your show. So tell us how to make it better. And we're considering a couple of things, like maybe even adding a tier where people can watch us do this nonsense live. We'll have to figure it out, but we want to know what the audience wants. So let us know.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.